This time I promise, quick tutorial talking about different ways to get detail on your sculpts and whether you're going to go voxel remesh or multi-res or dynamic topology. So here we have the default sphere. And if I turn on the wireframe, see this is the wireframe. If I go to the multi-resolution options, you can see this has 2 levels of subdivision already. And for the most part, this is basically all you need, I would say. So just when you're getting started, turn off the wireframe, you sculpt away, you do stuff. There's a nose, there's a mouth, wonderful, right? But you might get to the point where you're getting into like sort of really kind of fine detail down here, and we're going to make like a little, like a nostril. And suddenly you start to realize you're getting it faceted, and people start to ask, what do you do? Or really, what are the point people are starting to, like crease up edge detail. So, they're trying to get like a nice sharp definition for this, whoops, probably the wrong way, invert my thing. So, they're trying to crease up this shape for the nose, and they're finding that it's looking sort of lumpy bumpy, and what do you do? So the normal answer is you go, well, you can go up to multi-resolution and hit subdivide again, and now we've got more detail, and you keep sculpting, but then you're trying to get like really, really close, and eventually you start to run out, or you get to a point where you're trying to sculpt a detail like this. Let's say I've got like a really sort of extreme nostril shape like this, and no matter what I do, I can't push this shape through here, and I'm getting more tears. And then if I try and subdivide that again, it's still a bit lumpy. I try and subdivide again, and I will get this warning saying, whoa, hang on, you're about to hit 6 million polygons. Are you sure? So the answer usually is look at your wireframes and see what's going on. So if I turn on wireframe now, you can see that I've got, everywhere else I've got like really dense polygons. So these tiny, polygons the size of a pixel almost, if I'm out this far. But here, where I've done really extreme stretching, these are getting pulled apart. And so I just don't have enough detail here. And if you look at this, I mean, really what I want would be this sort of polygon density, but here. But there's no point subdividing every other polygon over here by 4 just to get a bit more detail here. So what do you do? There are a few answers. So one is that rather than keep pushing the multi-resolution path, you can go a voxel remesh. So if I go to the voxel remesh, which is down here, and I swipe up, you can use this resolution slider and this checkerboard to kind of have a sense of how much new resolution am I going to do, like say that. And then when you hit remesh, you'll see that it'll lose the multi-resolution, that's fine, but it gives you a new grid layout, which is more or less the size of the checkerboard that you had. And it's even no matter what the curvature was. So now if I look here, you can see that the polygons through here are now nice and even. They're the same up there. So I can keep sculpting away. So I can push in some more, do some more sculpting. If I decide I need sort of more detail, or usually what happens is if you're pulling out really extreme shapes, so say, I pull this out into like a body and a neck, and pull this down, and you can see that when you get really extreme, things start to get pulled apart, and you're getting these like crazy loopy shapes. Doesn't matter. All you do is you hit voxel remesh again, and it will relay it out. Sometimes you'll see this, where what's going on there is if I bring up the slider again, you see that it's going to almost like try and keep the shape you had, but then try and remesh it using this new voxel topology. And you can see that if you overlay this really fine checkerboard over this really lumpy bumpy shape, you're going to get a mess. A quick workaround for that is if you want to sort of like keep it but work quickly, just subdivide it once or twice so it's kind of smooth out if you need to, and then voxel remesh, and you should get something that's now good enough to work with. Almost always when you voxel remesh, you'll get some sort of artifacts. 9 times out of 10, you can just run a very quick smooth over it and it goes away. So voxel remesh is a perfectly fine way to work. Multi-res is a really fine way to work. The question people often ask is, okay, but which one do you go with, right? The answer is both. Usually when I'm working at the start of a sculpt, so I'm trying to just like get the base proportions of this guy, and I'm pulling out silly shapes. This is the best sculpt ever. Am I? And pull that down to there. So I'm just trying to get the basic forms. I'm intentionally not worrying about topology. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to maybe like inflate the legs a bit, smooth it all down a bit, and I'm just going to hit voxel remesh. I'm not even going to think about it. I'm going to smooth it all down again. I might even use the cool new operation smooth because it does a great job. There we are. Now I can sculpt some more, can bring down the arms and do things, whatever I want. And I just keep hitting voxel remesh as I go. If ever the mesh starts to fight me, voxel remesh, smooth it down, keep going. So there was a big sort of revelation when ZBrush first arrived of trying to, as a 3D sculptor, you're not thinking about topology. You know, that was the way of the past. You'd have to do sort of like a form follows function kind of thing. The advantage of high poly sculpting tools is that you shouldn't have to do that to start with. You just want to get the concept down. You want to make it look good first, and then afterwards you work out, is the layout nice and pretty. So once I get to, say, this stage, I might even be getting to a point where, if we look at this wireframe, that's fairly high res. Let's say I was down at more like this kind of resolution, even though I like that. And it's getting quite sort of heavy to work with. And I might be wanting to put, you know, like a belly button on the sky. So I might use the crease brush and I try and crease it in, but you can see that I don't have enough resolution here to do that. So here is another option. You could either keep using the voxel remesh and give yourself like enough high-res detail everywhere, just so that you can sculpt enough detail here, or you can use the other great trick within Nomad, which is dynamic topology. So if you go up to the topology menu, go across to dyntopo and enable it. So you'll see an icon activate here. So you've got to make sure that that's turned on. And what happens is simply, as I draw, Nomad will only add topology exactly where I draw. So you can see like that. So it's tried to seamlessly insert it in with the rest of the mesh, and I can keep zooming in. I think with the default settings, it's in screen space. So as you zoom in, it's just updating whatever it needs relative to the screen, which is amazing. And I can zoom right out again, and I can say, you know what? I don't need all this detail up here. If you have the smooth brush and you have dynamic topology enabled, that will actively reduce detail. And if I zoom out, it'll actively wind it down. But you see, the key problem with this is that whereas multi-res and voxel remesh will give you mostly nice, clean quad polygons, dynamic topology gives you, for the most part, triangles. Sometimes that really annoys people, and especially if you look, say, on kind of like smooth edges like that, you get these like sort of facety artifacts. The answer is simply try not to worry about it. If you push the detail slider here under dynamic topology high enough, so it's like, say, that, so it's reasonable, as you smooth, it just magically goes away. You will find cases where wherever you put down a stroke, sort of at the border of the cursor, so if I hold my cursor there and kind of point with this one, so kind of at the edge of this brush, you'll see it kind of like rippling as it's trying to insert this new topology into the existing layout. But for the most part, again, don't worry about it. You know, think of it as rough clay. This is just letting you sculpt without even thinking or caring about topology. If you look on the forums, you look on the Discord, there's a user, Sporkfu Master, who is incredible. He does the most beautiful high-res detailed sculpts of anything. He does it all using dynamic topology. The advantage of this, especially with tools like, say, the drag brush, is you can just like pull things out. Oh dear, that's not great. Let's go something like a big stupid head nose. And you can just keep sort of pulling and pushing on shapes. I don't have to look over here. That wasn't turned on. You can just like keep pulling shapes out and they just work. So it's this wonderful kind of like fluid process. If you are lucky enough to have one of the newer iPads that uses the second generation Pro Pencil, you can be twisting as you're doing these shapes. I don't have that. I'm consumer jealousy for people who do have it. We get a similar thing though, where you can, so with this pencil and with previous generation pencils, you can push and start to move. And while the pencil's still on the screen, you can touch with the second finger and you can drag it around, and that acts as if it's rotating. So I'll show you what it looks like. So I can drag up and then put my finger on the screen and I can start to twist. So you get these lovely sort of organic round shapes as you're kind of pulling it around. So this is great for just kind of like freeform sculpting. You're not worrying or caring about topology. But at some point, obviously, you are going to start caring about topology. And what do you do? So I'm going to see if I can just smooth this down with a smooth brush. So let's say I like this, but these facety edges are kind of bothering me and I want to get a nice clean layout again, especially if you're going to be handing it out to another application or you want to be doing UVs and texturing and stuff. Well, that's what the quad remesher is for. So sorry, people who aren't on iOS, you're missing out. If you are on iOS and you haven't bought it, stop this video, go buy it right now. It's the best 20 bucks you'll ever spend, because watch this magic. So you can see here that this is, I've got nice even triangle counts all over my mesh, but it's a mess, right? I can, with the quad remesher, say, you know what, I want 10,000 polygons roughly. You tap it, it thinks, and look at that. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful layout. This is amazing. So this is generally how I work. I will start with the default subdivided sphere. I'll be pushing multi-res until I start to fight it a bit and go, stupid multi-res. Oh, I know. And I'll voxel remesh and I'll begin working that way for a bit. I'll be voxel remeshing to increasingly finer levels and go, Matt, you idiot. Dynamic topology, turn it on. And I do. Then it's all free form and great. Once I get a basic form I like, I'll then use the quad remesher, get a nice clean layout. And oftentimes what I'll do is I'll actually do it on a copy. So I'll clone the shape, I'll quad remesh the clone, and I'll even sort of, if I solve on that guy, I'll just keep hitting this half button, which will try and do half the poly count of the existing mesh until I feel like it's sort of down around what I would expect a base cage to be. You see it's kind of fighting me a bit. Maybe, no, that should just be doing it. So eventually you can get this to be like, a nice clean cage. And then I can go back and look at the original cage and I can then project the multi-res version of this up. So I'm going to take this now. I'm going to go back to multi-res. I'm going to subdivide it a few times. Make sure this, so this is multi-res. And then I'm going to project the detail of the other meshes, of the other mesh onto this guy. So I turn the other mesh back on while this is enabled, go across to MISC, and I go reproject. And this should now have all the detail from the other one baked into this one, which is really cool. Always good to show examples. 12 minutes, that's not too bad. I want to keep this under 20 minutes. So if I look at, say, this guy, for example, which is a study of Aris Calicontes, I think is his last name. This one is just voxel remesh. So I just keep sculpting when the shapes were getting stretchy, voxel remesh, and just keep going like that because it was a fairly contained shape. It didn't have to have any sort of like lumpy bumpy parts. If I look at, say, what's another one that's got more stretchy shapes? So many things. I think it's got some silly looking sort of stretchy alien creatures from a while back. Yes, these guys. So these are based on sculpts by Carlos Swante. Concept art by Carlos Swante. These are dynamic topology. So, this was, all kinds of like crazy long shapes, and it's just like extruding and smoothing and pushing and pulling, and dynamic topology just let me do what I wanted, and I didn't think about it. And you can see that the result, it's okay. So that's that one. Whereas other times when I know I want to get like a nice clean mesh, I will use so I'll use a quad remesh, project details, and try and export something kind of nice and clean. So something like that would be, I think this guy is that. So this is another concept by Clear, I think his name is, I'm not sure. But you can see that this is largely sort of clean subdivision cages. I think this is based on tubes as well. Everything's been like sort of quad remeshed quite nicely. So it's a very clean mesh ready to be exported with nice clean UVs. I think I've got other better examples of that. Probably this guy actually. Where is he? The demo that comes up in the docs a lot, this guy. So this is if I turn on the face groups, no, there's no face groups. That is actually all voxel remesh, because you can see these sort of like telltale seams across here, where that's kind of like changing from one sort of voxel remesh, I guess, angle to another one. I was quite sure I had that as a cleaner mesh, but it doesn't really matter, does it? I'm sure I've done a better quad remesh recently. Maybe this guy? Let's have a look. that is, if I turn off all the shading tricks, so matte cap, and turn off post-process, and even turn off the shading, what we got here. So this is a nice combination actually, where this is, looks like I've done quad remeshing on various parts of the hand there. So you can see I've used face groups to help steer the quad remesher to get a nice result. But because this beard was so freeform, that is just a dynamic topology mesh that I've just sculpted and extruded out. The head is a multi-res sphere, I believe. Yep, I can down-res through it and up-res, so that's that. So you don't have to use one thing. You can mix and match. So I hope that explains everything. Yeah, basically all these tools are really useful. What's this guy doing? That is a subdivided quad remeshed thing, I believe. So if I can step down to the levels. It's got nice layout from the quad remesher, and then I have gone back into multi-res and sculpted in extra detail. Might even have, and there is a original sculpt that is voxel remeshed. So that's a perfect example of how I work. You can see sometimes with the quads, with the voxel remesh, you will get artifacts sometimes. So we have like very subtle changes of curvature. You get sometimes these kind of pimples on the surface. They can be sometimes a little bit hard to clean up. So if I kind of roll the mesh, you can see across here, you're getting this sort of acne. Again, the usual answer is either A, don't worry about it, because you can always clean up later. B, if it does worry you, usually you can turn off the face groups. If I use a default smooth brush, sometimes it'll clean it up, but sometimes it won't. If it doesn't, that's why it's working. So if so in the smooth options, make sure stable smoothing is enabled. If it's turned off, you see that no matter how much I smooth, I'm actually making more lumps rather than less. But with stable smoothing enabled, it's apparently fractionally slower, but it will really let you smooth stuff out, which is handy. The other way to smooth them is to use one of the flatten brushes, and you just like do a big strong sort of stamp across it, and that can clean it up. But more to the point, get it until it's kind of bugging you using voxel remesh or dyntopo, and then you can quad remesh it back into something really nice and elegant. So yeah, hopefully no more questions about multi-res or voxel remesh or dynamic topology. I'm sure there will be, but at least now I have this video that we can all share together.